Georgia, USA, 2008. A typical grocery store on the outskirts of town. A man walks in, grabs a chocolate bar from the shelf, and calmly asks for a job application form. While he fills it out, name, phone number, even his home address. The cashier continues serving the last few customers. Finally, the store is empty. The man hands back the form and suddenly pulls out a knife, cash from the register. The cashier, in shock, silently hands over the money. The man grabs the cash and runs off, convinced he just pulled off the perfect crime. But the next day, there was no need for a chase. The police simply took the form with his real information and waited for him at home, sipping coffee on the porch. In 2013 in Kansas City, USA, a 22-year-old man named Dominic Jones came to a McDonald's for a job interview. Everything was going fine. He filled out an application, waited for his turn, and sat in the lobby. When suddenly he stood up, pulled out a gun, and started demanding money from the register. The employees and customers were shocked. Dominic threatened the cashier, but didn't even realize that everything was being recorded on camera, including the footage of him just minutes earlier calming, writing down his real name, phone number, and home address on the job application. He fled the scene with about $100, but just a few hours later, he was arrested. The police simply showed up at the address he had willingly written down 10 minutes before the robbery. In 2012, in the city of Springfield, Illinois, a man named Derek decided to rob the local public library. He was convinced that it had to be storing donations, membership fees, or something valuable. He burst into the building in the evening when the reading room was nearly empty and shouted, "Where's the register? Put the money on the table." The librarian calmly replied, "We don't have a register. We're a free public library." Confused, Derek grabbing a few books from the counter ran out. The security didn't even chase him. He was caught 15 minutes later in a nearby park, sitting on a bench reading one of the stolen books. In 2013 in the state of Louisiana, 27-year-old Carl Barrett was working as a police officer while also taking a side job as a security guard at a local bank. According to his colleagues, he was quiet, calm, and just wanted more money. During one of his evening shifts, he put on a mask right there in the building where everyone knew him, pulled out a gun, and demanded that the teller hand over the cash. Security cameras captured everything: his walk, his voice, even his watch. He fled with about $25,000, thinking no one would suspect him. 2 hours later, he was arrested while sitting in a park drinking a beer. In 2015 in Arizona, a 24-year-old man named Trevor decided that a university campus must be full of expensive equipment and attempted to rob the administrative building of a local college. He put on a name badge ahead of time, trying to blend in with the staff, and entered through a back door with a backpack. Inside the office, he started filling his bag with laptops, projectors, and even a box of trophies. The problem? The campus had over 30 security cameras, and the badge he was wearing was his real one. Trevor had been a student at the college but was expelled the year before. Campus security stopped him at the exit when he tried to walk out. He was arrested on the spot. In March 2010, 27-year-old Albert Bailey from Connecticut decided to rob a bank without leaving his house. He picked up the phone, called the People's United Bank branch in Fairfield, and politely asked them to prepare $100,000 in cash. No tricks like die packs and no unnecessary noise. He said that if everything went smoothly, no one would get hurt. He even added that his partner would be stopping by shortly to pick up the money. The bank staff hung up the phone and immediately called the police. A few minutes later, Bailey's 16-year-old cousin walked into the bank carrying a suitcase and looking visibly nervous. He received the money, walked outside, and headed toward the car where Albert was waiting, but they didn't get far. The police had already surrounded the block. Both were arrested without a single shot fired. Small town, late at night. One guy is seriously drunk walking home when he suddenly decides to steal a car, just because he can. He spots a parked sedan with a slightly open window, climbs inside, hotwires it, the engine starts. Done. But instead of driving far away, he parks the car right in front of his own house, just 100 meters from where he stole it. An hour later, the police are combing the area and they find the stolen vehicle. While they're inspecting it, the drunk thief walks out of his house. In pajamas, he approaches the officers and, with genuine indignation, asks, "What do you want with my car?" Either he forgot he stole it or he's just too drunk to understand what was happening. Final result, 3 years for car theft and eternal fame in the local group chat as the parking genius. August 2022, Sacramento, California. 26-year-old Josh Sanders decided to rob a local bakery. A small shop, no security, good daily cash flow. The perfect target. The plan was simple: storm in wearing a mask, scare the staff, and take everything from the register. But Josh forgot one important detail. He had a severe flour allergy. As soon as he ran into the bakery, mask on, holding a toy gun, he immediately began to suffocate. Within a minute, he had a full-blown reaction. Tears, sneezing, coughing. He dropped the gun, tore off the mask, and collapsed to his knees, face against against the counter. The baker just stood and watched, then called an ambulance and the police. Paramedics treated him on the spot, the police did too. Josh was sentenced to 18 months of probation and a fine for attempted robbery. April 2023, Atlanta, Georgia. Two friends, Brandon and Luis, decided to rob a jewelry store. The plan was bold but simple. Climb onto the roof at night, go down through the ventilation system into the showroom, grab the valuables, and disappear before dawn. They brought all the gear, masks, gloves, rope, lockpicks, and even a bottle of champagne, just in case of success. On the night of the heist, when Brandon lowered himself into the store on a rope, he decided directly into a motion sensor. The alarm went off immediately. Luis, panicking, dropped the rope and tried to flee the scene. The police arrived within 2 minutes. Brandon was trapped inside and Luis was arrested in the yard while trying to toss the champagne into the bushes. Both were sentenced to 3 years in prison. June 2023, Tulsa, Oklahoma. 37-year-old Carl Davis worked as a security guard at a local shopping mall. One day during his lunch break, he decided he had had enough and came up with a perfect plan: rob the very store he was supposed to protect. During his break, he put on a baseball cap, pulled a mask over his face, walked into the jewelry department and started waving a toy gun. The clerks recognized Carl immediately and knew exactly who it was. One pressed the panic button, another called management. Meanwhile, Carl managed to stuff $12,000 worth of goods into his backpack and casually walked back to the security office. When the police arrived, he was sitting at his usual spot eating a sandwich pretending nothing had happened. Carl was arrested and sentenced to 4 years in prison for armed robbery. February 2023, Detroit, Michigan. 21-year-old Leon Burks decided to rob a grocery store. The plan was simple: walk in wearing a mask, wave a gun, and grab the cash from the register. He entered, pulled out a toy gun, and showed, "This is a robbery, everything in the bag, now." The cashier panicked, but then noticed something odd. The robber had a phone hanging around his neck with GPS navigation open. On the screen, a blinking marker said, "Route home." While Leon was stuffing the money, another employee snapped a photo of the screen and sent it to the police. 40 minutes later, officers were knocking on the front door. Leon had just laid out the stolen cash on his bed and was posing for selfies. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison. May 2023, 23-year-old Ray Johnson, reading an article online claiming that ninja warriors could turn invisible through proper breathing techniques, he decided to test the theory in real life. For his experiment, he chose a 24-hour supermarket. Before entering, he took a deep breath, pulled his hoodie down low, and whispered, "Now I am the shadow." Inside, he calmly walked up to the register, not even trying to hide, and began putting money into the bag. The cashier, thinking it was some kind of prank, just stood there watching. A nearby shopper started recording and asked, "Dude, you seriously think we can't see you?" Ray froze, then tried to slowly crawl behind the counter as if melting into the air, but security was already on the way. In court, he claimed he was merely studying the ancient art of vanishing. He received 1 year of probation. In Brazil, a 27-year-old man decided to rob a bank at the city center. He brought a water gun, painted it black, put on a cap and glasses, and walked to the branch with a weapon hidden inside the bag. Approaching the counter, he pulled out the gun and whispered to the cashier, "Quickly, everything you've got in the bag." The cashier began stuffing money into the bag just as the robber demanded. Only when handing it over did he realize the gun was a toy. But at that very moment, the fire alarm unexpectedly went off. Panic broke out, people rushed for the exit, and the robber simply blended into the crowd with the money in hand. 7 days later, he returned to the same bank to open an account. Wearing the same cap, the cashier immediately recognized him. Security apprehended him on the spot. The court sentenced him to 3 years in prison for robbery using a simulated weapon. January 2024, University of Utah Laboratory, 2 graduate students, Mike and Alex, decided to stage an unusual photo shoot for social media clout. The plan was simple: sneak into the cryogenics lab at night, release a bit of liquid nitrogen, and shoot a dramatic slow-motion video. They slipped inside easily, turned on their cameras, and carefully opened the main valve on the nitrogen tank. Thick white vapor immediately began filling the room, but the oxygen sensor detected a critical drop in oxygen levels and triggered an automatic lockdown. Mike yanked on the handle, tried to escape, but it was no use. Security footage later showed Alex pounding on the window in panic, but no one heard them. Rescue crews arrived 5 minutes later and forced the door open, but it was too late. Inside the dense fog lay 2 motionless bodies. Both students had died from asphyxiation. In Argentina, 32-year-old Carlos Mendez spotted a luxurious house in a quiet suburb and decided it'd be an easy target. Late at night, he approached the back of the mansion, looking for a way to break in. What caught his attention was the concrete fence. Instead of climbing over it, he decided to knock out the bottom panel and crawl underneath. As Carlos bent down to squeeze through the gap, the upper slabs, having lost their support, collapsed on top of him. Heavy concrete blocks crushed him instantly. The noise drew the attention of neighbors, who called an ambulance, but it was already too late. Paramedics could only pronounce him dead. The thief died on the spot, quite literally crushed by his own plan. A 38-year-old man previously convicted of burglary decided to break into a country house in an upscale neighborhood. Alarm system, cameras, sturdy doors, the house seemed well protected, but he chose an unconventional route through an old old stone chimney. At night, he climbed into the roof, removed the grate, and began slowly lowering himself inside. The narrow, dusty shaft narrowed near the bottom, but he assumed he could squeeze through. At some point, he got stuck tightly with no way to get out. The homeowner arrived the next morning unaware of the intruder and lit the fireplace, and within a minute, he heard muffled screams. Flames were already rising and the smoke filled the chimney. Firefighters quickly responded, but it took nearly 2 hours to dismantle the brickwork. The man was pulled out with no signs of life. Cause of death, suffocation. The man in a dark jacket and cap walks into a small liquor store. He looks around nervously, approaches the counter, and presses his hand to the side as he whispers, "This is a robbery. Put the money in the bank now." The cashier stays calm. One hand opens the register, the other discreetly hits the alarm button. Several 10 seconds pass, then the cashier notices something odd. A long object is sticking out from under the man's jacket. At first glance, a gun. But the shape's too smooth and even, with no details or edges. And through the fabric, there's a faint yellow color showing. Is that a banana? The cashier asks, squinting. "Shh," hisses the robber, but it's too late. The door swings open, the police officers burst into the store. 5 years in prison for armed robbery with an object resembling a firearm. Florida, January 2019. A burglar broke into a private home while the owners were away. He forced the door open, quickly searched the rooms, and gathered electronics, jewelry, and cash. Everything was going according to plan until he noticed a strange black box near the entrance, a Ring video doorbell. He stepped closer, squinted, and reached out to rip the device off the wall. At that moment, the camera automatically took an HD photo of his face. The image was instantly uploaded to the cloud and sent to the homeowner's phone. The owner immediately forwarded the photo to the police. Within 36 hours, the burglar was arrested right at a relative's house where he was already starting to celebrate his success. The court sentenced him to 7 years in prison. Night. A man in a black mask makes his way through a narrow alley and stops by a window. He knows the owners of the second floor apartment are away, and there's no alarm system. All that's left is to get inside. He climbs up to the drain pipe to the second floor, pulls himself up to the window, and starts squeezing through, head, shoulders, chest, but no further. His hips are stuck. He tries to push through, but it's no use. Minutes pass. Panic sets in. It feels like the window frame is pressing on his chest, like he can't breathe. He squirms, but nothing changes. The fear intensifies. His breathing grows erratic. In the morning, residents notice something strange. A pair of legs sticking out the window. Rescuers pull the man out, but it's too late. Cause of death, asphyxiation. London, February 1998. A man walks into a suburban bank. No mask, no weapon, just a piece of paper. He silently tosses it to the teller's counter and reads "money in the bag." The teller doesn't argue. He just starts packing the bills. The man grabs the bag and calmly walks out. Everything seemed perfect. Or so he thought. He hadn't even opened the money bag when, 40 minutes later, police knocked on his apartment door. One of the officers was holding that very note. On the back, a winning lottery ticket with the man's full details.